we go. And welcome to the new round table with its new virtual audience. All right. So I would love to make sure that everybody can hear us out there. Wait a minute. I'm sorry. I was muted. Welcome to our new virtual audience. New sound effects, people. Bear with us. It'll be new. So, by all means, we would love for you to give us a thumbs up to make sure you hear us. Thumbs up to make sure you hear us. We have with us Abigail Ruth. How are you, Abby?
I'm doing great tonight. How are you,
Please,
Pastor James?
please, good. Let us know if you hear Abby nice and clear. We have someone new on the round table, and this is Professor Vicky. How are you, Vicky?
Hi, I'm good, thank you.
And then, of course, Professor Chris. Chris, where are you?
I'm over here. Can you hear me okay?
Where are you? What number are you? 5?
I don't know.
Tap it. There we go. Try it now.
Okay.
There we go.
Good
Chris
evening.
is on the mic.
Good evening.
Yes, give us a thumbs up to make sure you hear us. Our topic tonight is defunding the police. As we've spoken before in the past, there is no such thing as really defunding the police. What they mean is defund the local police. And we who live in the wonderful Socialist Republic of Illinois, we are going to talk about not only defund the police, but with the wonderful new bill that our governor just passed. But it's happening not only in Illinois, it's happening all over the country. Jay, am I muted now? Can you hear me now? All right. Oh, from the Noah's Ark down in Kentucky, Jack is with us. Jack hears us nice and clear. Yes, Jay, I was muted, but I'm not muted now. So let's go ahead and look at what's going on nationwide. Here we go. I think I know what's going on. No, I don't.
Uh-oh.
Oh, I see it. I know what's going on. Hold on. Here we go. All right, now here we go. Yeah, that ain't working either. We're having technical difficulties once again. Hold on.
Getting used to a new soundboard.
We're getting used to a new soundboard. Let's see here. Media source. Hold on. All right, we're going to have to come back to that because it's not working. The sound is not coming through, but we'll figure it out. So, who would like to open us up and talk about this defunding the police?
Well, it's not going to be me tonight. I was prepared to talk about this a week ago, and now I don't know what happened to my notes. So I'm not sure how much help I'm going to be with this topic tonight.
I thought the bill was police reform, not defunding.
Yeah, it is police reform, but it's an assault on police that we're looking at nationwide.
It's being called a criminal justice reform bill, but it's also, it's actually the most radical approach to fundamentally changing law enforcement we've ever seen.
Yeah.
Those are the words of a 20-year law enforcement officer, Robert Johnson. So it's a bill that's going to create tremendous danger to the citizens of Illinois and a hazard for any police officer working in our state.
Yeah.
Here's the scary part. That's still an opinion because we don't know the full unintended consequences of what this bill is going to do either. I mean, there's things in here that eliminating cash bail. No one's done that before. We don't know what that's going to do. We don't know what the results of that are going to be.
Right.
So I always want to make sure that we understand there are a lot of opinions, but we really don't know anything about what's going to happen.
Right. What we do know is the final version of the bill was introduced after midnight on the final day of the lame duck session, which is always how the Democrats pass these things. It was not done in a spirit of bipartisanship. It wasn't done bringing all stakeholders to the table. It was passed with just enough votes and with very little discussion. Something of this magnitude, you know, they claim that they're solving a problem, but they didn't address the problem or define the problem in an honest manner. What they're doing is making basically every local police officer in our state a scapegoat. And instead of addressing what problems there are in an honest way and saying, let's bring everybody to the table and see what we can all agree on to fix these problems, instead they just make the minority. I think we can all agree that if a police officer does something
of course
inappropriate, illegal, they should be held accountable. Everybody agrees with that.
Of course.
But that's not what this is about. What this is about is making the small, or whatever the percentage is, of police officers who act inappropriately or commit, who do something wrong on the job, making that seem like it's the majority. When the majority of the police officers are good, decent, hardworking men and women, our neighbors, our friends, our family members, who are putting their lives on the line every single day that they go to work. And you could tell, because at the signing of this bill, there wasn't one law enforcement person there with Governor Pritzker, not one.
No.
And the remarks he made after the signing were divisive and deceitful. And that is not how a leader leads if they actually want to solve an actual problem.
Yeah. Well, they at one point, was it true that at one point every police organization in Illinois was against it? I mean, if that's the case, how do you pass a law dealing with law enforcement in which every law enforcement is against it? I mean, was that verified? Was that true? Can we say that was true?
I mean, I think we know usually when you sign a bill, you have all the stakeholders there at the signing. It's a big deal. And there wasn't one law enforcement officer there.
Or so you have people there to rah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very telling.
Yeah.
I agree.
This was all about emotion, and it was all a dog and pony show. This was about appeasing the loudest emotion and most emotional voices in the room.
Yeah.
Again, this wasn't about developing good policy for the citizens of Illinois, about the safety of the citizens of Illinois. This was not how you go about developing good policy. But the Democrats in our state, unfortunately, not to make this a partisan thing by any means, this is about policy. But the approach that they used with this, unfortunately, is a pattern in our state.
Yeah. It boggles the mind. It literally boggles the mind with what is happening. And so while defunding the police is the issue, again, we said before that no one truly wants to defund the police. They just want to defund the local police. It's the local police. And so what does this bill do? It really hamstrings a lot of the local municipalities. It causes good men and women who want to be policemen to not want to be policemen anymore. And you're giving the criminals an advantage. And for the life of me, I don't understand why you hamstring police.
Well,
I don't get it.
Let me help you out with that, Pastor James, because that is something I know something about.
Okay.
I've been, of course, we've been talking a lot about critical race theory in our series on white fragility. And the bottom line with regard to critical race theorists is that policemen keep the peace. basically. They allow life to continue as normal, and that is the last thing that critical race theorists want. In other words, they help to perpetuate the system that critical race theorists are trying to dismantle and pull down. So, and if you look, I'll just share some of these quotes with you. This was about social justice. So Governor J.B. Pritzker, here's he called the bill, quote, a transformative step forward in Illinois' efforts to lead the country in dismantling systemic racism. Okay, the key word there is not racism. The key word there is system.
Yeah.
And he went on to say, all of this was fueled by the experiences of those who have lived with police brutality and discrimination in this terrible year in the middle of a brutal viral pandemic that hurt black people and brown people disproportionately. Now, hold on a second. I'm thinking back to video of police. I think they were in Buckingham Fountain, right?
Yep.
Being pelted with
Their fault, though.
frozen water bottles,
Rocks.
Fireworks,
It's their fault.
rocks.
It's their fault.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but apparently, according to Governor Pritzker, that the police were, they were the ones being brutal. He also, let's see, in the middle this year in particular, to say this in the middle of this year. Discrimination in this terrible year in the middle of a brutal viral pandemic that hurt black people and brown people disproportionately. After the year we saw with all the riots and all the assaults on police and everything else, it's really outrageous. And finally, he said, quote, these lawmakers fought to address the pandemic of systemic racism in the wake of national protests over the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and Tamir Rice and Eric Garner and Quintonio LeGrier and Laquan McDonald and so many others.
Yep.
You know, it's just dishonest. I mean, okay, George Floyd, okay, I think we can all pretty
all
much
agree.
agree that that should not have happened. But are you going to throw Breonna Taylor in there? The drug
Well,
kingpin?
they did.
They did. And Tamir Rice, now Tamir Rice was the 12-year-old boy who was in a park pointing what looked like a real gun at passersby. It looked exactly like a real gun.
Yep.
And unfortunately, when it was called in, the person who actually said there's a I think it's a kid out there, but that did not get passed on to the policemen. So all they knew was
Someone's
there's
pointing
somebody
gun
in
at people.
pointing a real gun at real people walking by. So
Yep.
this is just so dishonest.
Yeah. But again, what's the end goal? I mean, what is the end goal?
To dismantle, to bring the whole system down. I know that
To
sounds...
do what? To do, okay, you bring the whole system down. But for what?
To replace it, because we're talking about, these are Marxists, ultimately. The people, critical race theorists are Marxists. Not all Marxists are critical race theorists, but all critical race theorists are Marxists. And they want the system to be dismantled so that they can replace it. And I know that sounds crazy, but if it does, go back and listen to our series on white fragility, and it won't sound crazy anymore.
Right.
Yeah. So here's what I'm going to bring this up, because again, some people are debating whether or not what the Illinois Sheriff's Association actually put out. They're debating whether or not it's true. Here's what I'm saying. I'm saying that the mere fact that they would even put that out there is the story. That the Illinois Sheriff's Association would put this out here. Again, for full disclosure, some people say that this is not true, or they challenge it. But let me put up on the screen here. Here's what it says. There's an active shooter at a local school. Police arrive and the suspect flees the scene. Uniformed officers catch up to the suspect, who is still armed, no longer actively shooting, and forcibly resisting arrest. The officers know who the suspect is, and he could be identified and apprehended at a later date. Officers cannot use force against the suspect, even though he just shot people moments ago. Now, some people say that's not true, right? Some people say that, but the news story is, why would the Illinois Sheriff's Association feel as though they wouldn't even need to put that out? That's their reading of it. One man didn't put that out. The association put that out, right? And so the fact that they would even do that is an issue. It's a problem.
It is. Our governor is making every local law enforcement officer in our state, they're making them out to be the bad guy, and now they're worried about what their job is going to look like, and are they going to even stay in this profession?
Did the association cite the part of the bill that
they did
would
not
lead to that?
They did not, and I think it would have been better if they had done that, because I saw on some boards they were going back and forth, and they were saying this is true. Some people were saying no, this is not true. Had they because one guy was citing the bill, and other people were not citing. Some people say it's not true. It could have been a lot more powerful had they actually put the language of the bill next to what they were claiming. But I did read some again, it was back and forth. People saying it was true, some people saying it wasn't true. But who on earth would want to be a police officer if that is true? If you actually get to a point to where it's an active shooter just shot people and police cannot use deadly force. I don't get it. I don't get it. And again, the news, whether it's true or not, the news is the Sheriff's Association believes it. They put it out there. I mean, how bad does a bill have to be in order for the Sheriff's Association to put that out there?
Right. And it's 764 pages,
Yeah.
this bill.
Yeah.
There are other things in the bill that are more disconcerting to me, especially if that can't be cited. Sheriff's Association, to play devil's advocate, they are not immune from playing politics either. At that level, they are not immune from it. Everybody, we all can get caught up in it, in the political spectrum of a little bit of fear-mongering. And that's why I asked that question. It's the only reason I asked that question is, where in the bill do you get that from, or does it spell out, or even can allude to it? And that actually brings us more towards a better conversation and a better argument and discussion. With that said, James, when we get to the other parts, there are other parts of the bill that are more discerning to me than that part, if that's in there. I'd want to know that it's in there.
Well,
Yeah.
I have in front of me right now that the governor's office did respond to each one of these scenarios put out by the Sheriff's Association. And I would like to say, too, that I think we have to be careful if it's a bad bill, which I think it is. I don't think we need to make it worse than it is, because we need to be able to trust somebody to tell the truth about these things. I mean, and as Christians, we have to care about truth.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And
yes.
So I do.
There's enough that we do know, for sure.
Right. So if the sheriff's department was exaggerating a lot,
Or a little.
or they shouldn't have done it.
Of course they shouldn't have. But the story is still, they did it. The Illinois Sheriff's Association had a reaction. And again, what was it? What was it, Vicky? It was introduced at 3:00 in the morning, 700 and some odd pages.
Yep.
I mean, you're not really, you're opening yourself up to some foolishness by doing that.
Right.
So it's amazing to me, what, so, hey, it's bad. It's bad.
It is. I mean, what we know for sure is that cash bail is set to be abolished by January 1st, 2023.
Mm-hmm.
And as Chris mentioned earlier, no state's ever done that before. So that's a huge issue. And this bill did make national news because it's so bad. Other things that we know for sure, the body cameras. They will be required to wear body cameras, which you can say, well, that's fine. But what if they just...
2025. By
Yep.
2025, the entire state, everybody at every level has to have body cam.
And they're not, I don't think they're giving more funding for towns that don't have the money for body cameras. But beyond that, there's reasons in here that, police officers would be charged with a crime if they forget to turn on the camera in the middle of a stressful situation. And they're not allowed
Wow.
to review the footage before they write up their report.
That's
So
crazy.
if they make a tiny little mistake in the report because it was such a stressful situation, then they're going to be, possibly charged with a crime for that.
I asked the question, who would want to be a police officer in this? Jack says, who wants to be a police officer? Who wants to be a citizen in such a state,
Right.
Yeah.
let alone a cop, right? So,
Right. It's making it harder for policemen to do their jobs.
yeah.
And all for the purpose of addressing the myth of systemic racism.
And again, one question because I don't understand is, and actually I watched a very sobering video of a black police officer who actually, it was his last day. He made a video saying goodbye. It was his last day on the job. He couldn't do his job anymore under these conditions. Because not all police officers, police officers come in all shades of skin color. So this whole thing, and this police officer that I watched the video of, he took his own life.
Oh, wow.
It was horrifying. So what about those police officers, and how are they? What about them?
Tough. That seems to be the attitude with
Right.
our government. We do have a new feature on the new audio setup we have here. We have here with us Jay, who's a friend of the show. Jay, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Hi, Jake.
We can.
We can hear you. We can now take phone calls, and so we'll take phone calls. Jay only paid $50 to be on the air with us. You could pay $50 if you want. No, I'm joking. Jay, you live down in Tennessee,
That's right.
right? Did you know that the state you once lived in passed such a crazy, radical law? And what are your thoughts on that?
Wait, so the HR 280 or something like that?
Well,
HB 3653. It went through. I think they keep using shell bills and stuff, but that
Okay.
ended up being the final bill number.
Mhm.
They
Wow.
move things around a lot in the Illinois General Assembly.
Yeah, it's all going downhill from here. But here's what I was thinking about. And so you guys asked the question, what's the end goal with defunding the police? And, I've heard, I'm not an expert on this, but I've listened to quite a few videos on YouTube from some of the more well-known people who are talking about this. There's some websites, Reclaim the Block. They're big on defunding the police. Critical Resistance is another website that is big on defunding the police. And some of their rhetoric is, I guess what they're trying to say is that they want to de-invest money from the police departments and then reinvest that money in programs that would make their communities better, safer, less crime-ridden, right? And so my question is, so that's kind of what I've been hearing consistently from all those different sources. They want to take money from the police department and then they want to reinvest it in communities, in their communities, in those communities. And so I had a question for you guys. Is there any validity in doing that? Do you think there's any validity to that argument? Now, that's just the defunding. There are some people who want to abolish the police department.
yeah.
That is a group, and they said that the police department was inherently racist. It started out with guys who wanted to catch slaves, and then after that was done with, then it was the police to enforce Jim Crow. And so the system is so bad that it just needs to be done away with. It can't be reformed. So there is a group that is saying that. But I do want to know, is there any validity to taking some funding away from the police department and then investing it back into community programs, into the school system? And then what do you guys think of the Peace Police? There's a group that calls
Peace
themselves
Police.
the Peace Police. Yes,
Yeah.
they are going. I don't
Uh-huh.
know if you heard of them. They're going. They're being trained by some activists on how to protect the black community from other people. It's almost like the new wave of Black Panthers.
Yeah.
And so he's teaching them how to shoot and how to protect only black communities. That's
Only
a little
black
scary.
community. I tell you
Yeah,
what,
only black communities.
if he went to the west side of Chicago and had success,
South Side, yeah.
then I'm all for it.
Yep.
I'm all
Right.
for it. But here's my thing: if you're going to reinvest, as you say, from the
Yeah.
police department, what entity are you going to invest in that's going to do what the police does? That would be social workers. Do you remember James Wood had they went after him on Twitter
Yeah.
because you showed this they showed this one man just knocking this lady out, and James Woods put the video up and he said, "Uh-oh, better call the social worker," and they went after him because that one little, I don't want to call it tweet or whatever, showed the stupidity
Yeah.
of taking away what the police does
Yeah.
and giving it to social workers. Social workers can't deal with that. And so my
Right.
question is to them: what would you take away, if you're going to take away from the police? What entity are you going to give it to? Ask Minnesota how that's going for them. Remember
They
when
backtracked, right?
is that what?
Minnesota backtracked on that.
Oh, they backtracked
they
big
did.
time. And
They
started, not only that, Minnesota actually had the gall to blame the police for the rise in crime in the areas in which they pull police from. Ask Baltimore how that went for them. Remember with Freddie Gray, and they
Yeah.
pulled the police out of certain parts of Baltimore because the police were racist. It took all of 8 months for that community to start screaming, saying, "We want the police back." And I
Yeah.
think at one point the police says, "Tough, we ain't coming." So
Yeah,
ask Baltimore how that went.
They didn't have enough moms going down smacking around their teenage sons.
Yeah. So if you're going to take away, what are you going to invest?
Yeah. And look how well governments investing in communities have been going since the Great Society in the 60s. You know, Jay, the fatherless epidemic in the black community. Even Barack Obama said that's the biggest problem in the black community is 70% of children are raised without fathers. That's a crisis. That's an epidemic.
That and, the lack
and that
of
was a
good
governmental
schools.
program. So reinvesting, you're asking the people who basically created the problem to take money and reinvest it into what the problem they more or less created.
Right.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and if they really wanted to do something like with Chicago, they could stop forcing kids to attend failing schools based on their address.
Yeah.
That's right.
That is a massive
School choice.
forcing kids to go to these horrible schools, and not giving them and their families a choice, and not because when there's choice, then maybe because it's not a lack of funding. They always say it's a lack of funding. It's not. The schools in Chicago have the same amount of money to spend per child as here. It's not a funding issue. It's a corruption issue.
Yeah. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
Yeah, and let me say about that too, as far as the schools go. I mean, Republicans in
be
general
exciting
support
because
school choice.
it's simplifying their job.
It's-
They're no longer
Sorry.
Uh-oh.
For some reason, the word. Go ahead.
It's the Democrats who oppose school choice at every turn.
Yeah.
But somehow that connection does not get made in these communities. almost unanimously elect Democrats. So, that's not something that pouring more money down in a bad school, that's not going to help.
No, and that's why this bill, as unfortunately it is with a lot of things on the left, it's all about virtue signaling, and it's not about what's effective. It's never about effectiveness.
Yeah.
There are things that can improve the lives of citizens and families in this state, and this bill is just a bunch of junk.
But again, it goes to the overarching horrible attitude we have police, and it's not just in Illinois. Listen to this clip.
Calls for defunding the police have led to a tense time in law enforcement.
Say his name.
Seattle's police chief Carmen Best quit the same day their city council voted to cut the department by as many as 100 officers.
It really is about the overarching lack of respect for the officers.
I spoke of the resignation with Cedar Hills Police Chief Eli Reyes.
If that's the choice that she's making, I completely understand.
Reyes was a finalist for the Seattle chief job that ended up going to Best.
It's been unfortunate that many of these truly progressive police chiefs across the country are being put in a position where they're either being forced to resign or making that personal decision to resign.
Resignations and retirements are a concern nationally.
We've had more police officers retire this year at this point than we have in the last 30 years.
Manny Ramirez is the president of the Fort Worth Police Officers Association.
Just last year, we saw a 60% decrease in the number of applications around the nation to become police officers, and we know it's going to be far worse this year.
But demonstrators continue their fight.
I'm excited that we're being listened to.
Hamza Khan was among those arrested in June on the Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge.
The defund movement, I think, for a good cop should be exciting because it's simplifying their job. They're no longer mental health professionals, emergency medical responders. We're letting them just be cops.
So as cities consider reimagining how they spend money on public safety, they face a balancing act.
Enough is enough.
Hoping to please protesters in the community while keeping the good cops around.
I just hope for the sake of our country, for the sake of America, that we see that spread across the nation where that support for police comes back.
In Fort Worth, I'm Alex Rosier.
Now, did y'all hear that this man sat up here and said that good cops should be happy about the defund movement? That is.
That's gaslighting.
What is he smoking, Jay? What is he smoking, Jay?
There was another interview with 3 black cops they had, and they all said the same thing. They all agreed and said, "I think that we're not social workers or mental health counselors, and there's some things we can't do as cops."
But
that was very confusing to me.
But how does defunding the cops, the defunding police, help
well,
at all?
because they take the money and then now they invest it in other agencies that will help the community. So they'll give money. So now they'll take money from the police, a third of the money from the police. Yeah. They'll invest that into more community mental health workers or whatnot. So now they can do more of the groundwork. So cops can only focus on some of the more aggressive, violent stuff. That's the idea. That's their main, that's kind of the hope, right? Is to let that happen. That's why I'm asking. I get what you guys are saying about the whole, you can't send a social worker if there's somebody's drunk and stuff like that. You're not going to send a social worker. They're going to knock her upside her head. But they're saying we're going to invest more money in the social work in the community, not necessarily send them on the call, but we're going to try and take care of the root of the problem in the community.
Yeah, let me give my opinion why that's a red herring. As long as we can give millions to other countries, as long as we can send taxpayer money across seas to give abortions, we don't need to cut funding to police.
Yeah.
It's foolishness.
James, I'm not so sure. I've looked at the websites and I scoured them, and I could be wrong. I'm open to being wrong. I'm not so sure what they're doing in the neighborhoods. They talk a big game about how much money they've taken from the police department or how much money they've raised, but I don't hear anything about how they're giving it back to the community.
Oh,
That's not on the websites. Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah,
could
you're
be wrong,
right,
but
Jay.
look, I can't find it. I just simply cannot find it.
You can't find where the money they took from police, they actually gave it to another agency. Is that what you're saying?
I can't. Yes, I cannot find it.
Because it takes an act of whatever the state Congress is to reallocate the money, even on a federal level. Remember, the president cannot spend money on something that Congress didn't allocate.
He's not supposed to.
Now, he can play games, potentially. Well, it's we're going to build walls with using defense money because it's a defense thing. Okay. But he can't take money that was allocated to the Department of Energy and put it in the Department of Defense. Same on the state level. To defund the police, to take the money or to reduce the budgets on a local and state level, you then have to have those local governments and the state governments, they have to reallocate that money. They then have to decide and either create the new organization, the new support organization on a local or state level, and then fund it from there. And with the state of Illinois being drowning in the debt that we're in, drowning in the commitments that we have, defunding the police is just going to go there.
But didn't Illinois get a bailout from the Biden administration?
Did they?
No,
Not yet. I don't.
That's
think.
what
I
they're
think
the
they're
whole
they want
COVID
to.
thing is
They
going to
want-
do. Potentially, it's what's going. They want to give money to the states too to help them.
Yeah, they're banking on it.
Yeah, that COVID relief bill in
Yep.
Washington D.C. only 10 or 20% has anything to do with actually COVID.
Exactly.
And he won't do his speech to the union
Yep.
until they pass the bill.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Chris. What you are speaking of is what ought to happen, right? That's we're far beyond what ought to happen. I mean, my goodness, the government isn't supposed to be able to shut down churches, right?
They didn't shut our church down.
Don't say that publicly, no.
Yeah, Chris, what you doing?
Standing up for the truth.
And Pastor James, I noticed in that little clip you just played, well, I guess it was about 5 minutes you played it, 5 minutes ago that you played it.
Yeah.
They said, in order to please protesters, and therein lies the key.
Yeah.
Protesters are radicals. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. They are radicals. And so therein lies the problem. This has nothing to do with making things better. This has nothing to do with wisdom. It's just it's a cynical PR move, and it's just going to further tear down.
Yeah, and I think
the system.
Jack was right. Forget just being the police. What are the repercussions? What are the repercussions of living in a state where that happens? Let me play this now that we got the clip.
Well, we will find out because it's not happened before.
But now watch this. Let me play the clip here about the lady. She's going to give a synopsis of what's actually in the bill. Here we go. Okay, you know what? It cut out on me again. So we'll circle back to that later on. But
Circle back. Oops.
Circle back.
Circle back to it. So again, here we are. How do we? First of all, let me do this. What if they continue with these cashless bills? Where are we a year, 2 years from now in the culture? Where are we?
Well, nobody really knows because this is a giant experiment. It doesn't mean it. Now, it does not mean that criminals, once they're arrested, they're all just going to be turned out on the street. It is going to be up to a judge's discretion to a certain degree, except now the judge is handcuffed a little bit more than he or she would be in the first place because now there's a very specific list of offenses that the judge will be able to hold a person on. But it does not mean that it's
Governor is expected to sign the bill,
which was my fear to begin with.
But I think
so why are we
there still is
verifying?
fear that there will be
The bill
people,
contains 764 pages of
who are released, and like, for example, an abusive husband where the wife expects him, to stay because and he can't post bail. So he's released and he comes back to hurt her. I mean, there's lots of unintended consequences that we just don't know about.
Yeah. So, I again, forgive the technical difficulties. For some reason, they want me to put it on mute and then unmute it for it to work. So here we go again.
Illinois House Bill 3653 is a criminal justice reform bill that was sent to Governor J.B. Pritzker on February 4th, 2021. The governor is expected to sign the bill into law, changing policing in the state. So why are we verifying this? The bill contains 764 pages of policy, and many are wondering what lies in the text. So let's break this down. Here are 4 key components of the bill and what would change for policing in the state.
Cashless bails, body cameras, training, which I'm sure will incorporate critical race theory, and use of force. Scales back existing Illinois law allowing use of force requires officers to consider the total consequences before they save your life. Again,
James, you mentioned the training.
Yes.
According to the bill, training, law enforcement agency or other first responder entity and programs that receive funding shall be trained in neuroscience of addiction, medication-assisted treatment, criminogenic risk need for health and safety, why drug treatment works, eliminating stigma for people with substance and use disorders and mental health. I thought this was to eliminate them being mental health experts. Avoiding racial bias and deflection program, promotion, racial and gender equality, working with community partnerships.
There you go.
Now, I have a movie reference. How many of you remember, I remember, I'm old enough, Robocop, the first one that came out.
I do.
He had 3 prime directives in the first movie, right? Uphold the law.
I don't remember it that well, Chris.
I don't either.
I just watched it again. That's what I remember. But RoboCop 2 came out, and I encourage you to watch it again. They decided to make him more community friendly, and they put in several hundred new directives. That when you watch it, you'll be thinking, "Wow, they predicted this bill." It is hysterical. Some of the stuff that they made RoboCop do, and you gotta see the movie.
Oh, gee, I don't know if I could take it.
But that's my movie references. This bill reminds me of the training required for police officers. It's RoboCop. Hey.
Jack says this: can you imagine CRT trained cops? Justice is no longer blind, but tilting toward equity. Well, Jack, I think that's already here.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
That's already here.
Yeah.
Right? So, but this is so sad. Jay, thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having
We'll let
me.
you
Bye,
go.
Jay.
We'll bring you back.
Bye, guys.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye, Jay. Good to talk to you.
So I came, if I could add this, I came across an open letter to the governor that was written by Edward Delmore, who is the former chief of police in Fairview Heights, Illinois. And for 30 years, he served in Illinois law enforcement. Now he is the chief of police down in Gulf Shores, Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote this letter to J.B. Pritzker. And it's a really long, great letter. I'll just read a tiny bit of it. One of the things he says is, by allowing this bill to become law, you will be insisting on reactive and not proactive law enforcement.
Absolutely.
And also he said, and those who can't leave will retire early, just like 2 Illinois chiefs that he had talked to that week when he wrote the letter. He said, while eligible, he said, in reality, they are relatively young men and could continue to serve in Illinois for many more years, but they are done. He said others that remain will back off. The proactive style of policing that, because he also still trains Illinois police officers, that I teach Illinois police officers will cease. You see, Governor, good cops have no problem putting themselves on the thin blue line, and they don't want medals and they don't want recognition. What they do want is to be assured that their bosses and their political leaders have their backs if they are professional, and yes, even if they make an honest mistake in the reality of the world in which they work, one that is tense, uncertain, and rapidly unfolding.
Yeah.
And definitely our governor made it clear he does not have their backs.
No.
That's exactly right.
No. And again, you have the Illinois Sheriff's Association. Now, we can say whatever we want to say about the Illinois Association, but that is a state association for law enforcement. And if they have that view of it, that's scary. That is downright awful. That's awful.
And you know, they're not just changing one or two big things. This is an 800-page bill. They're making major changes just to everything. You just don't do that if you are people who really have like the state's best interest in mind.
Yeah.
You don't do things like that.
And you don't do sweeping legislation dealing with law enforcement in the state by introducing at 3 o'clock in the morning.
And without bringing the law enforcement, into the discussion and the negotiation. But this was never about bringing that. This was never about.
No.
Right. The bills, unfortunately, and laws in our state, the titles are never what they're actually about.
It's usually the opposite.
It's usually the opposite. And I don't know, is the enemy laughing at us? He must be laughing at us.
Little loud.
Too loud. He must be laughing at us because this is.
Well, what
I
this
have
is
no
is
words for
social
this. I have no words for this.
experimentation.
With
Straight
law
up.
enforcement.
With deadly
And it's
possible
playing games.
consequences.
Yep.
All right. With that said, let's put it all in context with the Christian angle. What do we do? As believers, as Christians, what do we do?
We pray for our police officers.
Pray for our police officers.
Yep.
I think another thing when we see them out in public, taught my children, we go up and we thank them for what they do.
Absolutely.
Reminds us and them that we're all human beings too.
Yeah.
Right?
And they are appreciated by the vast majority of people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Whenever we see a police officer that sits whenever I see a police officer in our parking lot, I do go up to him and ask if he wants to go in, get some coffee or whatnot. Because I want the police to come when I call.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about other people. You know what? And if we ever, what I was thinking about this, if we ever had a rally against or a protest against the police outside the police department, I would go. I would go and I would say, everyone who's in that crowd protesting the police, here's a sheet of paper, sign your name and your address. So we know you don't like the police. So if you call, the police don't have to respond to this address. If you don't like the police that much, they don't need to respond when you call. I mean, they don't. If they're racist and they're evil, don't call them. And you know what? Publicize it. Publicize that the police will never come to your address and see what happens. I think the world is going upside down. As Christians, I think we need to just accept the fact two things are going to happen. Either there's going to be a huge revival, which I'm rooting for, or the darkness will continue to spread. And when that happens, boy, we really need each other. We really need to lean on each other. And I think we're going to need Christ in a way we've never even imagined. And unfortunately, I think that's where we're headed. That's where we're going. Any other closing words or closing words of wisdom?
I got nothing.
Nothing.
Prayer is our best weapon against the enemy, but it's not just against the enemy. It is for us to be able to sleep at night, having peace, knowing, as Christ said, don't be concerned, don't be worried. These things have to pass. If for His return, these things have to come to be. So, as Christians, we pray for the police, we pray for our politicians, we pray for those who would even wish us ill as a church and as Christians, because it's up to God, not up to, if it was up to us, like James said, I'd want to publish, you don't want the police coming to your house, I'll put up a big billboard telling everybody, hey, this person won't call the police.
Yeah, exactly.
How and we chuckle at it, but really that's not what we're about. That is not something. We would pray for the wisdom to call the police and ask others to come who willingly will give their life to protect you or to serve you.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that's, as Christians, we need to not ever lose focus of that. Our role is, there's good news to all of this stuff. All of this is coming to pass, and it's crazy. It's social experimentation. It's, the critical race. But there's an answer for it.
Yeah.
The perfect truth of God.
Yeah. And with that said, I'm sorry. Amen. And with that said, we will say good night.
For such a time as this,